Our next video is going to cover the accessory organs of the skin, or sometimes what are referred to as the appendages of the skin. And the skin is definitely the main organ of the integumentary system, but we have several other structures that are also going to be important. You've got your hair, your nails, you have sweat glands and oil glands. Now, in terms of where they originate from, they actually come from the epidermal tissue. Like for instance, you can see up here, here's the stratum basale, and it kind of goes around that little hair follicle. But if you're looking at where they are located, they are down here in the dermis, sometimes deeper into the hypodermis, depending on what the structure is. So the first one we're going to look at is hair, and most of us are pretty familiar with this because we have hair on our heads and we fix it and we pay to have it cut and things like that. Your hair is a flexible filament. It's pretty much almost all dead keratin. And so keratin in the hair is going to be a little bit different than the keratin in the skin. It's going to be a harder keratin than the one that's you'll find in the epidermis of your skin. Now, hair has a variety of functions. You know, nowadays it still technically can be used to help keep us warm, but for the most part, because we can wear clothes, it's not quite as important as it might be in other organisms. But it can be used for protection, you know, like our eyelashes and our eyebrows and things like that will protect, you know, our eyes and other areas from getting dust and debris in them. There could be some sensory input. You definitely have some feeling down at the end of those little hair bulbs. There's some nerves that can, you know, you heard of the phrase, make your hair stand on end, things like that. And then there is some thermoregulation involved in terms of, you know, forming goosebumps and trying to stay warm and generate some heat. And so each hair root is going to be connected to a smooth muscle. They're called erector pili. So these are out of our control. They're going to be involuntary muscles. But those erector pili muscles will contract, and that's what causes your hair to kind of stand up. And that's what creates those goosebumps that you see on your skin. That can help us, you know, a lot of times in times of stress, the hair will stand up, or when we get cold, that will happen. And then the hair gets its color from melanin, just like in the skin. We'll look at, you know, skin color, and there's different types of melanin, and the same thing's going to be true for your hair. And so those melanocytes, in this case, are going to be down in the hair papilla, down here in the dermis. And you can see there's some blood vessels and things like that there. That's where you're going to find those melanocytes. And so the basic hair structure, you have the hair follicle, which is where the hair is going to originate. And it's going to anchor the hair down into the skin. So it's pretty deep into the dermis. The hair follicle is going to be this region here. And this is where the hair is coming out of. Now down at the very bottom, we're going to have the hair bulb, which is where that root ends in the dermis. And this is where you're going to have those active cells that are dividing and growing to actually create the new hair. And so that's also where you're going to find that hair papilla, where you find those melanocytes as well as some capillaries and nerve endings. And then the hair itself, you have the shaft that is going to be outside of the skin. This is the part that we see and cut and shave. And then you have the root that's going to be in the skin. And it's going to be kind of surrounded by that hair follicle, and then that hair bulb on the very end. Nails are going to be some harder, thin plates on the end of our digits, our fingers and our toes. Once again, they're going to be layers of hard keratin, and they're going to help protect us. They're going to be coming from the stratum corneum, that outermost layer of the epidermis. Basic structure here is you have a nail bed, which that's going to be all the portion that's underneath the nail itself. There's going to be blood vessels there, which is why it kind of appears pink. The nail body, or the plate, is what's going to sit on top of that nail bed, and that's really kind of what we refer to as our nails. The part that grows over the edge is called the free edge. A lot of times those appear white. That's what we will have to trim up or cut, or maybe, you know, you have your nails done, maybe file those down. The nail root is going to be down here, kind of in the skin there. And at the end of the nail root, you're going to have the nail matrix, or it's called the matrix germinativum or something like that. But that's where you're going to have dividing cells, and that's where you're going to have the new nail forming. And then it's going to be growing outward toward that free edge. And then you have some folds that are going to cover and surround that nail. You have some lateral folds that kind of overlap and hold that nail body in place. And then you have a proximal end fold right over here, and that's what forms the cuticle, which a lot of times we're familiar with those because we have to trim them up. Another accessory organ is going to be your sudoriferous glands, or your sweat glands. And the main function of sweat is going to be to cool the body. But we actually have two different types. We have eccrine sweat glands and we have apocrine sweat glands. Now, eccrine are going to be a type of merocrine gland where they're secreting by exocytosis. And of course, your apocrine sweat glands are going to be a type of apocrine gland where you have a pinching off of that apical surface. So your eccrine sweat glands, you need to remember that they are found everywhere. The eccrine are everywhere. They're going to be especially abundant on the palm, soles, and forehead. And these are the ones that we use for thermoregulation. The eccrine glands are glands that are going to release their sweat directly on the skin surface. They're going to have a duct that actually goes all the way up to the surface of the skin, and where they release that sweat in a funnel-shaped pore. And once again, that was by exocytosis, which makes it a type of merocrine gland. Now, for the most part, you have a hypotonic sweat, which means it has a whole bunch of water and not a ton of solutes. And so it's mostly water. There will be some salts and antibodies. There's a little bit of metabolic waste there. There's also some antimicrobial proteins that kind of help fight off bacteria. Now, this sweat is acidic. It ranges from about 4 to 6, and so that acidic liquid can actually help prevent bacterial growth on our skin. And then you have your apocrine sweat glands. Now, these are not going to be found everywhere. They're only found in specific locations. These are the ones that you will not find in your thick skin. And so typically they're associated with hair follicles, and we don't really have to deal with them until puberty. And these are the ones that are going to be in the axillary or the armpit area and the kind of genital regions of the body. So they are going to release their sweat into a hair follicle. So rather than the surface of the skin, they're being released around the hairs. They're larger and deeper in the dermis, and the sweat content is different. It's not the same kind of like really watery sweat that you'll find coming from your eccrine glands. It actually contains organic compounds like lipids and proteins. And what will happen is bacteria will get a hold of these and they'll degrade them, and that's what can actually create some pretty foul odors. So you tend to have a smell in those areas where you have apocrine sweat glands when you release that sweat. Now, this is more of a hormonal control type of sweat. This is the type of sweat that you may, when you get really nervous, you may experience, or under stress or sexual activity. This really isn't about thermoregulation. This is more just about a hormonally controlled sweat release. There's a couple of types of modified sweat glands. You have ceruminous glands, and these are the ones that you find in your ear that create earwax. It kind of joins up with some of the shedding of the skin in your ear and kind of forms that waxy coating. It actually kind of helps keep things from getting into that ear canal. And then you have mammary glands, which are a type of modified apocrine sweat gland, and these are the ones that produce milk in the breast. And then our last accessory organ are going to be our sebaceous glands, or our oil glands. They are found all over the body, and they're going to help waterproof the skin. Remember that oils don't like water, and so they kind of create a waterproof covering. They also are going to surround the hair and kind of nourish the hair and surround it with oil to kind of make it softer. So it's kind of a lubricating. You won't find these in the thick skin though. Your palms and soles are not going to be oily. They're going to be a little drier. And it can help keep the outer layer of your skin a little more pliable. So the oil glands actually secrete sebum, which is kind of an oily type of secretion. And it's going to be secreted into that hair follicle. And many of these are going to be active at puberty. And so a lot of times your skin or your hair may not be oily or have too much oil until you hit puberty. And so a lot of this is going to be genetically determined. Some people have oilier hair types, some people have drier hair types, and it has to do with how much oil is going to be secreted into those follicles. Same thing for your skin. Certain areas are oilier than others. And so in the sebum, there are some fatty acids, which are a type of lipid, and they can have antibacterial properties. They can also, once again, kind of help prevent water loss. And if you have a pimple, it's because these oil ducts are getting clogged, maybe by dirt and things like that. And so that can lead to those pimples that we see on our skin. All right, so which type of gland is involved in thermoregulation? All right, so ceruminous made earwax. Endocrine were hormone glands. We really didn't talk about those here. So we have apocrine or merocrine, and the merocrine glands were your eccrine glands. The apocrine were the ones that become active at puberty. The eccrine were the ones that are going to be responsible for helping us maintain body temperature. And then sebum is going to be secreted by the sebaceous glands or the oil glands. The part of the hair that is within the skin, all right, so the shaft is on the outside. The bulb is down at the very, very base. The root is the portion that is going to be under the skin. And that takes care of objective 5.